we will be recording this session, so I just have to give her a little bit of notice so she can start that. And anybody who has registered will receive a copy of that recording. So welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome our class of 2020, many of them who are online now, and many of our alumni and community partners. I want to say thank you for joining us on the second of our nonprofit leadership series. Like every other organization, Leadership Waterloo Region wanted to respond. We wanted to find a way where we could use our skills in the community to pull people together. So we looked at having this free nonprofit leadership series, and we will be running it twice a week until it's no longer needed. So we're booking to the end of April, and we're listening to our participants. What areas do you want to learn more about? So on Monday, we had Jim Clemmer come in and speak about leading through crisis. And today, of course, we will be welcoming very shortly Jim Moss. And in the information that was submitted in the last registration, our mental health came through loud and clear. We all are looking for a way not only to guide ourselves, but guide our teams and culture through this. We'll go through other sessions. We have a new one, another one, an additional fifth to announce later today. But for now, I am just going to turn it over to Bethan. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. So I'm going to just go through a couple of housekeeping items and also our virtual convening principles, which I'll dive into in just a moment. So to kick us off with some housekeeping, meeting virtually can be tough for a presenter. So if you're on screen and Jim says something that really inspires you or makes you really happy, we encourage you to shake your hands. It's a way to kind of give him a visual cue to let him know that he's doing a good job and that something resonates with you. Life happens. Whether it be kids, cats, dogs, or garbage trucks going down the road, you know, life is noisy. So we ask you to keep your audio on mute unless we call on you to participate, or, you know, if we want to open it up for the Q&A session. Some folks like to follow along with the presenter, and others, like me, like to be nosy and watch the reactions of everybody else that's in the room with us here this over the lunch hour. So you can actually set which view you'd like, whether it's gallery or speaker view, and you can do that in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Please use the chat. Don't be afraid to use the chat feature during the session. It will not be distracting for Jim, and Diane and I will be monitoring that for any questions that you might have. We would like to see you, but obviously if you need to go for a bio break or if you need to pop off camera to do something, feel free to turn it off. But of course, we'd love to see you come back on. We will have time at the end for a Q&A, but as I mentioned before, please load your questions as they come up into the chat, and we'll keep a track of those. Please stick around to the end. As Diane mentioned, we'll be announcing our next free session, and you'll want to know about this one, I assure you. We are recording the session, as Diane mentioned, as well, so that you can share this with your teams. The link for the recording, resources, and a quick evaluation will be shared within 24 hours. So Leadership Waterloo Region, like many organizations, had to pivot pretty quickly to be able to continue to provide our programming. So it was important for us to pull together some virtual convening principles to guide how we would approach this really unusual situation. I won't read through the details for them all, but I'll touch on the highlights from each of the 4 different principles. First off, no one signed up for this. You know, no one signed up for the sickness, no one signed up for physical distancing, and not for the additional stress that COVID is causing on everybody. You know, no one signed up for having to master new technologies when you're at your busiest times, and not for the sudden halt of our collective lives together in the office. We promise that we will remain human-centered. So we're going to prioritize supporting each other as whole human beings and everything that entails. We can and will continue to share our mission virtually. a large part of Leadership Waterloo Region's programming is around shared experiences. These are no longer possible in person, but we are committing to creating emotionally engaging virtual experiences instead. And finally, we will remain flexible and adjust to the situation. So nobody knows where this is going and how long it's going to be lasting for. But in times of crisis, we are going to lean on strengths-based leadership of trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So those are our virtual convening principles. So I'm going to turn it back over to Diane, who will introduce Jim.
Wonderful. Well, it's my pleasure truly to be able to introduce to you today Jim Moss. Jim has the coolest title in town. He is the Chief Happiness Officer, CEO, and co-founder of Plasticity. Jim is on a mission to give 1 billion people the tools to live a happier, higher performing life. He is a former gold medal winning professional athlete and Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame inductee, which I just find amazing. His high-level understanding of sports psychology and education in positive psychology became Jim's catalyst for the company. Jim shares his personal story and motivation that brought him into the research that the business is built on today. Today, he educates and trains business leaders and managers to reach their personal and professional potential by building great corporate cultures and investing in well-being. Jim was the top-rated speaker for Deloitte's Canada's 360 conference series in 2017. He has been profiled in media around the globe, including the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, HuffPost, Canadian Business Magazine, CBC, and TechCrunch. I'd also like to talk, just to give you note, Jim, about the wonderful work that you do with the school boards and all the schools with that hero generation. The way you bring your thoughtfulness, the mindfulness into our children. And I know with your humor, this is just going to be a fantastic session. So I'll turn it over to you, Jim. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Testing. I'm really grateful that you're all taking the time, but also that you trust me to bring some of what we know from our experience and our research to you today. And when I was going through preparing, we've been writing some articles, etc., but really starting to think about what this means and how it's impacting people and unpacking the science that supports that. It's really quite an incredible event, but we know a lot. We know very much about the science that should help us understand better how to guide our way through this, and not just for ourselves, but for our organizations and for our people. And so historically, we've spent most of our time really helping get the most recent academic research into applied methodologies where people can actually put it to use. I was also reflecting that it was 2009 that I contracted the H1N1 virus, which is the last really major outbreak in North America. And it was that H1N1 virus that ended up causing my post-viral autoimmune disease, which is what forced me to relearn how to walk. And everything that I have done since then is based on the experience of healing and growing through an outbreak similar to this one. And so one of the things that was really striking to me was when I think back on my own experience, the number one thing that a time like this gives us as a gift, if we can see it as a gift, is time. And everything in our life, got called into question, and much of it has been put on pause, which has given us so much time and having to rethink how we use our time and our energy, etc. And if you imagine 6 weeks or 6 months in the future, when things start to return to a newer normal, another new normal, we will think things like, man, I should have done this when I had so much time, because all of a sudden life's going to just start ramping up again. And so I'm really glad to know that you're seeking for professional and personal development right now and leadership development, because there is a time and a unique opportunity to learn things in a new way and also apply them in a new context that we don't have these opportunities like this, gratefully, very often, but when we do, we have to make the most of them. So I'm going to just switch over to the screen share here real quick. Let's hope that it all works nice and smoothly as we tested it. There we go. And so it seems odd to be talking about happiness at a time like this, but it's actually really quite important. And Diane, you mentioned the work that we do with the Hero Generation, and that work is really about helping develop the character traits in young people that predict their ability to handle life's difficulties with the greatest ease, but also to return back to a state where they can extract joy. So happiness is about not being blind to the difficulties in life, but really about being able to handle the challenges, the realities of life, and still be able to extract joy from the moments that present themselves to us, where joy could be made available. Whereas joy is just that momentary experience of happiness. And so many people kind of confuse happiness as joy, but happiness is really flourishing, which we're going to talk a little bit later. And so we need people to continue to flourish, even during really challenging times, even when we find ourselves in entirely uncharted waters. Many of those people work in your organizations. And so we're going to talk about how do people stay happy? How do you impact people's happiness, but also their health in a positive way when going through a crisis such as this one. It's important to say that when we started the company 8 years ago, we built a happiness company. And it was through the collecting of data that we realized that the biggest thing impacting people's happiness in a negative way was work. And so we became a workplace happiness company. And then as we started to collect more and more data, we found that the number one thing contributing to people's unhappiness or happiness inside of the workplace context was culture. And so for about the last 2.5 years, we've really been working hard at helping leaders understand what we call the foundations of culture. And those are the things that craft the day-to-day experience of working at your organization. And to the extent that those things are healthy or less healthy, predicts how hard or how easy it is for people to get their work done, which has a direct impact on their health and their well-being. And so we've got 7 years of data and statistics that support that. And so what we've done is we've married together that research and that data with the academic research on these different concepts. And so I'm going to give you an ultra crash course in that today. Normally we do this in a half a day or half a day over the course of 5 days, 5 half days. And so you're going to get a real crash course in it today, just so that you've got a framework to understand the different concepts that I'm going to talk about when we get into the employee happiness. Then we're going to talk quickly about employee happiness itself. And then hopefully, if we have time, we're going to talk about leaders as well. Because this is really and truly a time when we have to put our own oxygen masks on first. People need our leadership. And this isn't just at work, it's at home, it's in our finances, it's in our family and our friends. We're supporting more people than we've ever supported. And so it's creating this codependency that puts additional pressure on leaders. And if you're not healthy enough, mentally, physically, psychologically, and emotionally, it will be very difficult for you to be the leader that you want to be during a difficult time like this. All right, let's get right into it. First things first, deep breath. Now, I want you to think of one thing that you're grateful for that you've experienced since the time that you woke up this morning. You just hold that thought in your mind for about 15 seconds. I'm going to show you mine. And there's not even booze in it yet. Okay, so normally there's a whole part of the presentation that we talk about that. Gratitude, taking a moment of gratitude is the single easiest way to reset the neurotransmitters in your brain into a happy and focused predisposition. So it brings you into the moment by focusing on something that you've experienced value from very recently and impacts your what's called your state. Not your trait, but your state of mind. Okay, foundations of culture. Here we go with the crash course. What is the purpose of an organization? An organization has a vision of an improved future version of the world, right? That's our vision, especially in the not-for-profit. The vision is really important, and not everybody understands exactly what it is. But the vision is how you see the world could be in the future if you do the work that you're going to do. And so if I were to think about the hero generation, our vision is a world where every child has the social emotional skill set to handle life's challenges and experience and spread joy. That's our vision. Our mission is the thing that we set out on to accomplish our vision. So this is the strategy of how we think we can create vision in the world. Sometimes these two things get misconstrued or reversed backwards, but your mission is the journey towards creating your vision. Along the way, on your mission, you set goals and pursue those goals, and ideally accomplish those goals as a way to accomplish your mission. And your mission is a way to accomplish your vision, right? Okay, so what is the purpose of an organization? An organization exists to create value by accomplishing goals. Who you create that value for, what that value is unique to each of your organizations. But the thing that is the same amongst all of you is that your organization exists to create value by accomplishing your goals. So what is culture? This is something that sometimes we'll spend an hour on. And I will ask this question of a group, and I will ask people to answer it in their own words, and sometimes workshop it at their tables for half an hour. But really, it is the culmination of every factor that exists within and beyond the walls of your organization. It's the policies, it's the people, it's the thoughts, it's the actions and behaviors, and it's always changing. So it might look, if you've ever seen the slow motion videos of a big flock of birds that are moving around, and they almost look like a single unit, but it's alive and it's moving, right? And there are all these different factors and variables and conditions that are moving that. And that's like a culture. And it's not just the members, the birds within that flock. It's also the wind. It's the sun. It's the predators that are out there. It's all the different conditions that it exists amongst. And all of those things come together to create a predictable belief of how that group is going to accomplish their goals together. So something super important from the previous slide is that it's all about accomplishing goals. And so anytime people say that culture is, the soft side of business, it's because they don't understand this piece. Culture is what creates a positive, hopefully, prediction that we will accomplish our goals together. So if an organization exists with a vision and it's on a mission and it wants to accomplish goals, right? Then the culture is what it will be like while we do that work together. Everybody on track so far? I'm really trying to imagine some of the people that don't have a face. I'm trying to imagine what their hair looks like. Okay. So culture is how people expect the experience is going to be while they work together to accomplish their goals, all right? I asked a room of CEOs, a lot of CEOs, I want to say 150 to 175, to explain culture. Nobody could do it. Nope, they got close, they got little pieces, but they couldn't do it. And then there was this one woman who was there, and I didn't know this until she spoke, but she was actually the executive assistant of one of the CEOs and had been his assistant forever. And she finally stood up and she said, "Oh, Jesus, Murphy. It's how we do things around here." And that's it. Culture is how we do things around here. If you think about that statement, how you do things around here, it means that if I were to ask you how you do this or how you might do it, everybody would have a slightly different version, right? But it would be their explanation of what they expect that would be like. And that means it's based on what that experience has been like in the past, right? And so while it's changing all the time, the longer that it runs for, the more that patterns emerge. And those patterns change the way that our brain is wired because of something called neuroplasticity. And so neuroplasticity, we're going to talk about a little bit later, is this feedback loop between your thoughts and your actions, and the feedback that you get from the world that tells your brain what patterns it should expect and how it might want to behave within those patterns. And so if culture is this really complex network of thoughts, actions, and beliefs and behaviors, in our opinion, that means it's very much like a brain. And so it changes in very similar ways. It's goal-oriented, it has a belief system, it has a history of behaviors, and it uses all of that to construct some concept of what the future is going to be like, and then create shortcuts in trying to accomplish that future. Okay, so a lot of times when we get into what is culture, we hear things like, oh, it's free lunches, and it's ping pong tables, and it's blah, 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 which really helps me understand why they think that it's fluffy and that it's a nice to have, which is also why you would cut back on it in a time like this, because those are extras. Those are not the foundations of culture. Those are the extras that we add on, usually to correct for the weaknesses in our foundations. And so if foundation's dinner and it wasn't very good, we try to make dessert better by throwing in a ping pong table or doing those other things. And so when we start to uncover what those foundational components are, what are the things that happen with the most consistency, that have the biggest impact on people's expectations for the future, then we get into a very different set of things. So the first one is, de facto, to be an organization, you have to have two or more people. Two or more people come to community. So a community of people willing to work together towards a common set of goals. And so there's the organizational goals, and then you've got a group of people who are willing to do this work to try and accomplish those goals. Our values, which we're not going to talk about much today, but our values are create the alignment between how we will consider accomplishing those goals, and the extent of the community's alignment with our values predicts a more direct targeting of effort to accomplishment. That's called value alignment. But first, we need a group of people willing to work together towards those common goals. That's what a community is. Each of you have those. They're changing right now. Many of us have had to lay off some of our community. Many of us seen the community of customers change and grow, or their needs change. And so that community component that may have been fairly stable for a long period of time is in flux right now. And it is the absolute foundation, the lowest piece of the foundations of culture. And it's in flux right now. Next, we have trust. So when we measure culture, the two of the most important predictors of well-being are trust and community. And the reason is, if those things are weak, it's harder to do our work. If it's hard to do our work all the time, we have to spend more energy. We're going to get into that. But trust is super important because first we've got a group of people, right? Let's say we've got these two people. The degree to which they trust each other is how closely they're going to work together, but also how likely they are to focus on their expertise and not be looking over the shoulders of the other person. So when the shit hits the fan, which it's currently, in the fan, and we're on the other side of it, we don't have time to be second guessing whether somebody's doing their work, right? Or whether they need our help. We need to trust that they're bringing all of their energy and their focus and applying it towards the goals. When we send out a communication, we need to trust that people are receiving that communication and believe what we're saying. If you haven't got trust yet, this is a very difficult time. And so how you behave if you have a lack of trust in your organization has to be significantly different. You do have an opportunity to build trust right now, but how you go about that is different. Ideally, you've got trust and you can lean on that right now. Otherwise, expect a very significant lag between information, behavior change, change of requirements, change of goals, and activity, okay? So community and trust are the two most fundamental pieces. Next, we've got communication. There is no world where communication isn't ultra important. The number of times that we measure organizations and their culture and their well-being and their engagement, et cetera, and communication is the lowest score. And we'll come in with the data and we'll talk to the leaders and they will say something like this: oh, please God, just don't say that we need to work on communication. And it's because we've been working on it forever, but it's always changing, right? Look at us now, learning how to use Zoom for training for things that we would have absolutely pushed to be in the same room together if we could. But we've got to adjust to the times and adjust to the technology and adjust to the requirements and figure out how to communicate in a million ways. The other thing that we find all the time is that organizations have humongous budgets or percentages of their budget spent towards external communication. But we don't spend the same amount of time, energy, and money communicating internally. Often we don't even have the policies and the guidelines. So just seeing the preamble to our discussion today, talking about the new behaviors and habits of this type of forum, that is a fantastic example of making sure that we think in a similar way to the importance that we place communication for our customers and our stakeholders on our internal teams. If people don't have the information that they need on time and accurate, it's very difficult to do their job, right? And so you can imagine that right now in the middle of this crisis, where information is changing every single day, if we don't get that most recent information on that protocol or that change to policy, whatever it is, we can't expect people to be assimilating that into their decision-making framework or their, how they choose their next behavior, the next thing that they say, the next things that they do. They might continue to work on old goals, and those goals have changed because we've got this new piece of information. All of those things happen across the communication network. So the community, if you think of it as a crowd of people, right? Trust is the extent to which they're far apart or close together, and how strong those connections are between the different nodes in the network. Once you have a community and it has trust, then communication travels across that network all over the place, information going constantly. To give you an example, if we have cracks in our community and we send out communication, it might miss a whole pocket of people because that community is not connected. If we've got a community but we don't have trust, what happens when we send out a message across a low trust network? What happens is, instead of taking that information and passing it along intact to the next person and the next person, the degree to which we lack trust predicts that we will replace our opinion of the information in place of the original information that we received. And so that's how the telephone game happens when we have low trust. The message that was originally sent gets changed as it goes out. And right now, more than ever, we cannot afford to have the wrong version of the information out getting to our community stakeholders and our members, right? If you think about communication as like a bucket line, and the communication is the water in the bucket, and its goal is to put out the fire at the other end of the bucket. If we have low trust or we have a disconnected community, the bucket either doesn't get there or it's empty when it does, which means it can't accomplish the goal that it created. Every time somebody takes a bit of the water out of the bucket and removes part of the information or changes it with something else, we don't have that same amount of water to put out the fire that it was intended for, okay? So community, trust, and communication are the fundamental things that allow a group of people to trust each other and work together And then the communication gives them the information that they need so that they can work together towards accomplishing their common goals. On the way to accomplishing our goals, feedback and recognition. This is another subject that is really grossly misunderstood. And it makes perfect sense why there's so many of the behaviors that we see in management structures in an organization. Just to give you an example, many people think that recognition is gratitude. So you should recognize me for showing up on time for my shift. No. I'm grateful that you showed up on time, and I extend that gratitude via your paycheck. It's part of the parameters that we agreed upon to accomplish or to outline the very base functions. Recognition is a smaller set of gratitude. So I'm grateful for all sorts of things, but I choose to recognize the most important behaviors that are going to help us accomplish our goals with the greatest efficiency. So we call those best behaviors. What are the most critical behaviors? Is it kindness? Is it empathy? Is it clear communication, right? Is it integrity? So a lot of times our values, right, are disconnected from our best behaviors. Our best behaviors need to be decided upon because that's how we choose what to recognize. And so the fact that employees don't feel recognized is often because they don't know exactly what they should be doing that would earn recognition. And so they're left guessing from everything that they do. What should you be recognizing, right? So recognition is about what are the behaviors that are going to take us towards our goals with the greatest efficiency. Those are the things that we want to recognize. So every time I see them or somebody else sees them, we call them out and we connect them to the goal and we connect them to why they're so important. Those are the things that take us towards our goals. Feedback is for when we are veering off path from our goals. And so feedback is about nudging us back towards accomplishing our goals again with greater efficiency. It's never a straight line from effort to accomplishment, right? We zigzag along the way. And so feedback is for when we start to zig or zag too far away and the trajectory is now leading us away from our goals instead of accomplishing our goals. So does that mean that we should provide feedback once a year? No. We need to provide feedback real time. Because if I asked you to drive to Toronto and you ended up in Newmarket or at Canada's Wonderland or the Bass Pro Shop, because that's where you like to go, telling you at the end of the year isn't going to save us any time or energy, right? So we need to have agreed upon goals, because if we agree on the goals, I will welcome the feedback and I will receive it with less emotion because what I care about is accomplishing our goals. But if we don't have well-defined goals, then I don't agree necessarily to why you're providing me this feedback. And so feedback and recognition both have to be specific and timely and in alignment with our goals, okay? So that is the ultra crash course on the foundations of culture. Hopefully it gives you just a simple concept of what those basic things that we talk about all the time, how they actually come together to create a predictable experience for employees or for our customers. And you can imagine, to the extent that these things are weak, when we put the pressure of a COVID-19 crisis on top of a weak foundation, any cracks in that foundation are going to get really big really fast. And things are going to start to fall through those cracks. And so the extent that we haven't been grooming these foundations of culture before now, we can expect more difficulty. Because if our communication network is weak, then we've got a broken communication network, but it's the only thing that we have right now, and we still got to try and push information out there. And so there's going to be a delay. If we don't have trust, if our community is weak or fractured, right? If we don't understand what feedback and recognition are for, then as we change our goals, it's going to become much more difficult to gain that efficiency that we need towards accomplishing our goals. So you probably haven't heard people discuss efficiency with culture before. And that's the biggest mistake in why people misconstrue culture as being soft. Because culture is just all about the decision-making framework that's going to help me make the best choices to accomplish my goals and the organization's goals. And hopefully those things are all aligned together. But it's all about inefficiency, because every second that people spend second guessing a communication or wishing they had recognition for the wrong thing is energy wasted. And when we have to waste too much energy, then we feel burned out at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month, because we never have enough resources, right? And so we can't afford to give away time and energy resources because of these fundamental things. And you'll notice ping pong doesn't factor in here. Ping pong is great if we have all of these things in place. Ping pong feels like bullshit to an employee if these things are weak and you're trying to sugarcoat the turd with a ping pong table. Does that make sense? Nobody likes sugar-coated turds. Okay. So this is a visual that I created just to help us understand this in a visual way. So you take those foundations of culture, and they are the fuel that create the parameters. So those two lines are the parameters. So the extent to which our foundations are well aligned with our goals, then we can bounce along in between those parameters along the way. And as long as we're providing feedback and recognition to stay in that channel, and feedback when we start to veer outside of it, then we should be able to predictably and realistically accomplish our organizational goals. We should never expect everything to just happen perfectly. It just never happens. You've ever seen that meme of like what we expected it to be and it's a straight arrow, and then what it actually was and it looks like a bird's nest? That's the reality. What we're trying to do is straighten that line out a bit. But if we zoom in on it, it's always going to be ups and downs based on how people are feeling, what's going on at normal times, right? And so those foundations of culture set out the parameters of what people should expect the experience to be like while we try to accomplish our organizational goals. So to the extent that that is out of alignment with our goals, right, then people are going to bounce around inside of that channel, but that channel is misaligned with the goals that we have. And so the probability of getting to that place is reduced. It continues to reduce. And so, in this kind of crude example here with the visual, we've only got a chance of maybe accomplishing about 50% of our goals because of this misalignment that's happened over time. So when the foundations are strong, let's just review a couple of these things. Community attracts and retains the best possible people whose values are aligned with those of the organization. That's what community's for. So to the extent that people understand the organization well, you have things like your net promoter score, people are out there attracting the next best member of your organization. And the ones who are the most well aligned feel that alignment, feel valued and valuable. And so they stay. And that keeps your community healthy. Trust lets us move quickly to action. So trust keeps us moving directly and quickly in agreement with our goals. So remember, I'm mentioning goals over and over and over again, because you can only measure the strength of these things when you compare them to the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And so we need the right amount and the right kinds of trust between the right relationships depending on the goals that we're trying to accomplish. If you don't ever interact with the CEO, you need to trust them generally, but you need to trust your supervisor or your manager intensely. You need a more personal level of trust with the people that you work with the most, right? If that CEO can thrash around and have a major impact on your day-to-day efforts, you also need that personal level of trust with that person, right? Communication gets people the right information on time so they can do their best work with the greatest efficiency. Recognition helps us develop the best behaviors that we require to accomplish our goals. And feedback allows us to course correct those behaviors when we might be moving in the wrong direction. When we have the foundations intact and they're strong, we accomplish our goals more consistently and more predictably, right? That's what allows us to take on more things, take on more aggressive goals, is because we've got energy that results from the efficiency that the foundations of culture create in the way that we do our work. So we spend less time, energy, and money in the effort of accomplishing our goals. So that efficiency shows up in the balance sheet in our expenses, but it shows up in the health and well-being of our employees when they experience that inefficiency, and they have to work way too hard all of the time just to keep the lights on. All about efficiency. So efficiency means that employees get more done in less time, requiring less energy. It means that they invest less of their time and energy, and it insulates the employee's health. So the fact that they can go home at the end of the day and they're not entirely empty means that they can have health easier in their personal lives. It means that they've got energy to go to the gym or go for a walk and do the other things that maintain their health. It means that that stress doesn't create stress in their relationship with their spouse or their partner, right? And so the PERMA model of happiness says that we have positive emotions, we have engagement with life, relationships. So relationships is community. And then we have meaning and accomplishment. And meaning and accomplishment actually comprise 40% of our happiness. So we knew meaning for a long time, but we really didn't understand accomplishment until just the last 10 or 15 years, like really well in the psychological research. And so when we can accomplish our goals more consistently, and our goals are in alignment with the vision of the organization, this is how it very directly relates to our happiness. Is that we feel efficient and effective, and that our skill set provides value to the organization, which means that we experience accomplishment, and it starts to make us feel like we have meaning in life. When we don't have meaning in our work, that work is 20% less likely to provide us with any happiness. And so meaning and accomplishment account for 40% of our happiness in the workplace. So right now, potentially, people have an opportunity to have even more meaningful work, right? And so, or they've been laid off and they've lost that entirely. And so that part of their bucket is getting empty. Let me just check the time here. Okay, so the longer that your culture has existed, the more that it has this really long pattern of history, which creates a farther view in our expectations. So the longer that people have experienced it a certain way, the more likely they are to predict it being a certain way in the future, continuing to be that way. However, COVID-19 comes along and changes everything. So we no longer have this history that accurately maps onto the future, and that creates uncertainty. So that uncertainty is, what are we going to do now? How are we going to do it? Can everybody still hear me? Okay, good. Phew. So are our goals moving? And if they are, have we communicated that to people? And do they understand how this major crisis is going to impact the future? The number one thing that we have to do is give people back some sense of certainty in a period of ultimate uncertainty. So a couple of really critical things here we talked about. When we talk about happiness, we mean flourishing. Flourishing means the ability to experience joy more frequently, more of the time, even under very difficult conditions. People who experience flourishing are more likely to handle challenges as they come at them, and then return to a state where they can extract joy. They digest difficult news in a healthier way, and they're able to put it in a healthy frame of mind or perspective and carry on. They extract more joy from the moments that are available, and they're able to spread that joy and provide those moments for other people. And they're more likely to experience post-traumatic growth or growth period. So not just growth during good times, but growth during difficult times. And so right now, the people who have the skills to flourish coming into this are more likely to find opportunities of personal growth for right now. The number one threat to people's happiness right now as it pertains to the workplace is uncertainty. Uncertainty creates fear in our brains. And that fear changes the neurotransmitter balance inside of our brains. And so to the extent that we experience fear and uncertainty, we are more likely to experience less happiness. And as that goes on over time, it starts to impact our health and our well-being. And so when everything is changing so rapidly, we stay in this kind of hyper state of fear. And even when we're feeling safe, that fear response has a hair trigger right now because there's been so much change and uncertainty that we've been experiencing in our life. There's a whole session that we do on this. It's called your fight or flight response, and it's managed by your amygdala, which is in the base of your brain. And that amygdala, its only job is really to attend to the world and decide if you're safe or not. So it has all this complex impact on our emotions and our state of mind, but really fundamentally its job is to ask the world, am I safe right now? And if I am, I'm going to leave all my resources available. And if I'm not, I'm going to pull some of those resources offline to attend to the world just in case I need to fight or flee. So certainty versus uncertainty. If we tie these things back to the foundations of culture, trust and community, when they're healthy, improve people's certainty. Certainty makes people feel safe. Feeling safer makes us happier. So if there has been a change to your trust or community as a leader right now, those are the fundamental, the two lowest levels of the foundations of culture. You need to find a way to try and shore those up and give people back a sense of certainty in that. So if you've had to lay off a large percentage of your population, people might be feeling less certain about the community that remains. And so we've got to try and rebuild that as fast as we can. Communication makes people feel like I'm going to have what I need, the information that I need in time before I need it. And so right now, with this rapid frequency of changing information, we need to make people feel certain that as things change, we as leaders are going to get them that information that they need in a very timely way. Okay? So every time we do it, especially as the communication cycle speeds up, like Justin Trudeau right now is doing a daily with all of us, with the whole country. It is the perfect example of increasing the frequency and the quality of the communication to give people back a sense of security and certainty. There are things that we don't know about the future yet that he doesn't know either. But because we've seen him so many days in a row, we have much greater certainty that when he does have that information, he will share it with us. And so frequency and quality of communication build a new sense of certainty and a new trust that we're going to get from our leaders what we need. That certainty makes us feel safer and happier. By the way, I love seeing your pets in the background. Somebody's cat just went up the stairs. There's also, I've seen a couple of little human animals running around. Neuroplasticity is the way that our brains wire, right? And rewire and rewire and rewire. And right now, because everything is novel, it's the first time, our brains are hyper attending to it. And so in a period of time like this is when our brain is actually willing to and ready to change our habits the fastest and the most. And so as leaders, we have to be hyper careful as we go from old normal to the newer normal, which will be replaced again in the future with another new normal. Everything that we start to do with any consistency creates a new set of predictions for people about what they should expect in the future. And so we're allowed to behave badly, we're allowed to make mistakes, we're allowed to say the wrong thing, but we better not do it too many times in a row in a period of time right now. Otherwise, people's brains are going to change to expect that. And so we need to create this consistency, right? Day in and day out, so that we try and craft the healthiest possible new normal. People understand the goals. As we get new information, they know if those goals are still the goals. They know if the way that we're going to approach those goals is the same. And all of that kind of comes together to create this certainty. And so it's not it's not absolute certainty. It's just improved certainty versus total uncertainty. And so as leaders, and this applies intensely to yourselves as well, it's all about giving back as much certainty as possible as we can. Don't promise certainty if you don't have it, right? But try to extinguish the extent of uncertainty that needs to exist. And so that is trust and communication and feedback and recognition. So here's a couple of examples for you real quick, and I'm going to share this with everybody afterwards so that you'll have this. You can have this slide deck. If you have community, remind people and thank them. Thank them for continuing to be a part of your community. You know, we've got people who are volunteering to do work because they've been laid off and they're going to get EI, but they know that you still need them, and so they're volunteering, right? Our community is changing. We need to make sure that they feel valued and valuable more than ever. And every time we talk about our community, we're telling everybody else that's in that community that you can still see it and it's still healthy. And so even if they can't see it because they're working from home and they're used to seeing it in person every day, that community is still intact, maybe working differently, maybe with different membership, but still working towards the goals. If you have trust and when you see it, call it out and thank people for it. Because it's so critical right now, every time somebody acts in a trusted way, we need to highlight it and provide recognition. You know, I told you to go and do that thing. Normally you may have had some questions, but this time you just turned and went off and did it as fast as you could. And I'm so grateful for that trust, because we can't afford to waste any time right now because we're operating with so many fewer resources right now. If you have good communication, if you have good communicators, shine a light on them and use them as an example every time you see it, especially the people who are doing it, because it may or may not be your own strength, and people don't need you to have every strength. But if they see that that good communication is owned by somebody else in the organization or somebody else on the leadership team, then they start to attribute that to the whole organization. So shine a light on it every single time and on the person specifically that's doing it. When somebody provides or accepts feedback to accomplish your new goals or to move directly towards the goals, you need to ring the bell. Feedback is hard, but super important. And we need people to say, even you as the leader, you need to model it. I'm so grateful that somebody gave me this feedback because I was doing something that was maybe insensitive, and I needed to know that so that I can change course. And so highlighting that feedback and that humility that you as a leader need, but also you need your employees, your staff members, your volunteers to have, that is the perfect thing to be highlighting right now and providing feedback for. And then demonstrating the new best behaviors. If you haven't done this already as an organization, first you need to say, what are we not doing anymore? There may have been things that we used to do. We can't do those anymore. We might do them again in the future, but these are the things that we need to stop doing. These are the things that we need to keep doing. And these are the things that we need to start doing. And highlight specifically in a prioritized way, what are the most important ones? Okay, best behaviors. New best behaviors that are part of the new normal that are going to take you towards your goals with the greatest efficiency so that people don't burn out. We'll call it acute burnout or accelerated burnout, because burnout is a very chronic thing. It's happened over a long period of time. But a condition like this, if the conditions for burnout existed, even if people weren't burnt out, a situation like this hyper accelerates that burnout curve. And so we need efficiency more than ever right now because we can't waste time and energy in a time like this. So when people feel safe, or ways to make people feel safe, clarify the goals as the same or changed. If they've changed, explain why and how they still align with your vision. Hopefully you've got the trust that you can see why these goals have to change and why they still align. And while they not be able to see that from where they sit in the organization, hopefully they will trust that what you can see from where you sit means that these things are still taking us towards that important place that we all want it to go. Clarify the actions and behaviors required right now, right? What are we stop doing? What are we going to keep doing? What are we going to start doing? and then reinforce that you trust that they can do it. You might be asking them to do things that they haven't done before, but you trust that they can do it, or that they will figure it out along the way. Make them feel trusted so that they don't go away and sit at their desk wondering what they should do, but they're more likely to at least try to do whatever they can do to accomplish the goals, because you trust them to do that, and we're allowed to make mistakes along the way. And then provide examples from the past. So we've never been through this before, right? We've never been through this specific thing before, but we've been through shit before. Just different types, different smells. And we got through those periods of time with certain behaviors that made us successful, that allowed us to be resilient, even in ways that we didn't think we could be. So search for those examples from the past and remind people of them now. We've gotten through hard things before. Here are some of the ways that we did it. And while the situation may have been different, the behaviors and the decisions and the thoughts and the actions are the same that are going to be required now. And so we don't have a perfect example to model from, but we've got the pieces to piece together some historical concept. And if we can give people some of that example from the past, it gives them back a bit more of that foundation of greater certainty now. And it all comes back to certainty in terms of their health and their happiness right now. Okay, so afterwards, I've offered to make myself available on Twitter and answer questions for the next 30, 40 minutes. You know, I'll sit here actively and answer them for the next 30 to 45 minutes. If they dribble in after that, I will continue to answer them afterwards. But I can't promise that I'll be sitting in my dungeon here the whole time. We didn't get a chance to talk about individual leadership, happiness to the same extent. But the most important thing I need you to know about that piece, actually, you know what? I'm going to turn off my screen here and just switch back to camera view. Sorry, I've got a black screen for another second. Stop share. When we used to work all together and we could see our leadership team every day with our own eyes, we could see that they were wearing pants. Instead of just having to trust that they're wearing pants, we would see all of these subliminal messages that told us that they were healthy. And when they started to show some different signs, right? When my beard started to grow, my employees used to say you could tell how stressed I was by how tall my hair had gotten by the end of the day. And they could see that. Because even if I was sitting at my desk and we weren't on the screen together, the hairometer was getting taller and wider. And that meant that I was having a stressful day, because this is what I do when I'm on a phone call and I'm stressed out and nobody can see me. So all of the richness of that type of information that we get about our leaders, our managers, and our team, we don't have that richness anymore. And so we have to ask more explicitly. You have to say, Jim, how tall is your hair right now? How stressed out are you about this? What specifically is making your hair bigger and taller than normal? And so we have to try and get the same information that we have to look out for each other, but we don't have the same channels of getting that information. And so much of that richness of information comes through our five senses that, you know, are blind right now. You can't smell that I've showered. You have to trust me. You can look for other visual signs. But if I stop showering, I might be trending towards a depression. I might be feeling burnt out. But you can't smell it, so you don't know. So you need to ask, how are you doing? What's stressing you out? What are you feeling the best at right now? What else do you have going on in your life? And so we need to create formal structures where we're communicating about this. We need to start every meeting with it. We need to finish every meeting with it. We need to make a buddy system that we've never had before, maybe, where I'm not going to be able to talk to everybody, but I need to know that somebody's talking to everybody and anybody. And if there's something that we need to know, we need to trust that that information is going to make it back so that we can adjust course. If leaders get sick right now, we can't do the important work that we're supposed to do. And I know many of you are working 20-hour days, right? I know that the team at the YMCA built a shelter in like 6 days. And there was 50 people sleeping in it. And they've been talking about building that shelter for a very long time. And then when it was really needed, they did it in 6 days. But it didn't happen easily. And it didn't happen without great effort and without very stressful decision-making. And things that would have been risky had to be accepted all of a sudden because you didn't have the time to mitigate every single risk. But they did it, right? And so when you're doing things like this, you just need to keep checking in with each other. And then each of you needs to know what you can do to reduce some stress. And I'll give you a hint. The single greatest thing that you can do right now is expose yourself to nature. Don't just go for a walk in your neighborhood, because you will notice that people don't make eye contact, that people are steering away from you, right? You're going to notice that it's empty, that the cars aren't moving around. Your brain's going to attend to all the things that are different. But if you go for a walk in the forest right now, first of all, the access to the trees is proven to reduce our stress, but it's the same forest that it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And so your brain will not need to hyper attend to all the things that are different. In fact, it will feel extra comfort from the fact that it's the same as it's always been. So go and find a forest and a trail. Go there. I don't care if you have to drive there. Take a phone call there, whatever it is. Take a phone call in the car along the way and don't participate in the video. Take it by phone on the way to the forest and get to a forest and walk in it. It's the single easiest thing that you can do for a period of time that will remove the stress from sitting right on top of you and being visually reminded by it every second of the day because so many things are different. Instead, you'll find yourself in a place that's exactly the same and exactly as wonderful as it's always been. And if you do it enough times, you'll build a new habit and you'll value that time in nature in that forest when things do go back to new normal in the future. Okay.
We have some questions, Jim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shoot.
Excellent. Krista Cressman has a question here, and Krista is one of the ones who has identified herself as having a bad hair day.
Fair.
So her question's really great. What questions can we ask to have staff open up and discuss whether they feel trust within our community?
Super good one. Mm-hmm. So trust is a hot button topic, especially when it might be less than optimal. And so if you ask too explicitly about it in too large of a group, don't expect anything. Expect people to clam up because of the absence of trust. What we have to do instead, if you have high levels of trust, or if you believe you do, then ask about it. Does everybody trust the information that we're getting? Just ask straight up. If people answer, then you were probably right, that you had some. If people do this, this is what it looks like on a video call. If people move from leaned in and they physically distance themselves from the concept, you just got all the information that you needed. If you believe that you have a lack of trust, then you need to look for where trust should have existed. So I told this person this thing, and I told them I needed it by this time, but then there was a delay between when it happened. And so look for the gaps where trust may have been an issue and ask questions into that space. So remember we said we were going to do this thing, and then this happened instead, or you were going to pass this message along, but I heard that this message is the one that's been received. Tell me about what happened there. So don't talk about trust. Find the places where trust maybe was lacking and dig into questions about what went from here, I thought we were going from A to B, but we ended up at C or D. And what happened in that space? If you start leaning in about trust right now, too directly where you don't have it, it will be counterproductive. Okay, is that helpful?
We have another question here too from Krista. What are different types or forms of communication that we can employ to help our teams feel connected? So specifically, how do we build in that quality?
Okay, so first thing first, you need to pick your channels, right? You've got in-person, which right now we don't have, but that we get that via phone or video. We've got digital, we've got email, right? Hopefully you don't have a fax anymore. That's not on the table. We've got text message. So what are the different channels that we have? First thing we need to do is map out our channels. Then we need to decide which ones are for which kind. So for example, formal communications should go out via email to everybody. So the reason why an email is so helpful is it goes in the exact same format to everyone. The weakness of it is that we had to try and make it one size fits all for everyone. And so if it requires any personalization at all, it shouldn't be done via email. And so if we save email for bulk communications, then over time, people will expect bulk type of communications from there, right? And so you've eliminated a bunch of the chain, the buckets in the bucket line. Checking in on people, you're better to use more private channels. And so if you have chat or text message, like a quick text, it's like, hey, how are you doing? In a text is direct. They know that it's only the two of you, right? And they can tell you. And if the answer isn't, I'm doing okay, then you say, can I give you a call real quick? And so the text is like checking the temperature, right? But I'm not going to text message you a Tylenol to break your fever. I'm going to call you and try and learn more about what's going on and how I can help specifically. And so you don't have time to call everybody all the time. And so a text message is a good way to just check in. Now, critical for right now, because people are all trying to protect each other and themselves. If you ask somebody how they're doing, what are they going to say? I'm okay, I'm good. So what do you have to do? No, I really mean it. How are you doing? And so ask again. Always double check right now, because even under normal times, people do it. And so it's like when we say hi, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm great. We have canned responses. And so we can't just accept the canned response and carry on right now. We need to double check. No, I really mean it. I want you to know that I care about how you're doing. And if you don't feel comfortable telling me, just let me know that you've got somebody that you can talk to if you need to. And so picking the right channels for which types of communication is critically important right now. If you don't have trust, you should pass along communications from sources that people might trust. So don't rewrite the COVID whatever in your own language. Take the email that came from the ministry and pass it along, right? Or you should be using references. So if you paraphrase something in your own language and you don't think that the organization has the trust that it needs, then you should say, we got this information. It was in quotation marks because we took it from this source, and here's the source. Hopefully you trust them. But even just any effort you make right now to think things through a little bit more, a little bit like a proofread your communication and the channels. I see somebody said, biggest concern is how to communicate changes in day-to-day business to your team. Set up a time slot where you will commit, and it could be the start of the day and the end of the day, but it's the exact same time, where you will share the most important information that you have at that point every day at this time. As if you've ever set your alarm to get up at the same time, right? The first couple nights, you don't trust it. And so you wake up and you're looking to see if it's on, to see what time it is. After that alarm has gone on a few times and it's set for 7 a.m., fourth or fifth day, you start waking up at 6:58 because you don't want to hear it. That is how powerful your brain is. So if you give it set times when events will happen and you have consistency, the brain will move from consciously attending to it to subconsciously expecting it to happen because it has a history. So set up times and be super consistent about, even if there's nothing new to communicate that. The same time as yesterday, there's no new information today, but I just wanted you to know that if there was, you'd be getting it right now. I'll check back in with you again at 3:30. If there's any new information by then, I'll send that to you.
That's great advice. You know, when you were talking about how uncertainty really creates fear, that sounds like a good tool we can all use to make sure we're combating some of that in our workplace. We have a comment too from Debbie Reifert just saying that this is in long-term care where she works. We not only have ourselves and families, but those we're providing for to care for and to trust. So that's a lot of times your circle of trust goes far beyond your team.
Well, yeah, and imagine, so we work with a number of people who work in that, or organizations who work in that space. And so imagine that now the family members can't see with their own eyes the things that give them a sense of safety and trust. And so imagine every layer of relationship, the foundations of culture get compounded, right? Because I can't take that family member aside down the hall and say, listen, I just want you to know, I know that you're really worried right now, but we are in that room checking on them every 15 minutes. And I know exactly where I can find you down in the cafeteria, and I'm going to come and tell you right now, right? How do you replicate that in a period of time like this? In healthcare specifically, one of the biggest threats right now, same as burnout getting accelerated, is compassion fatigue.
Yes.
Because so if you think of conscious and subconscious attention, we've got ways to moderate and exhibit our compassion in normal circumstances. And because we've done them that way so many times, it takes less energy. It's automatic. This is how we do it, right? But because this is a new time and we have to change and do new things and more of them, we have to consciously attend to those things because we don't have habits for Zoom yet, right? We don't have habits for trying to do a conference call with a family when we used to be able to just sit them down in a room and talk to them all together. And so it takes far more cognitive and emotional energy to do new things than to do things that we've done so many times before. The good news is that as time goes by and we do those things with repetition, the neuroplasticity of our brain will start to create that de facto new normal. And so, but in this period of transition, and then when we have another period of transition and another period of transition, compassion fatigue is going to be a real threat. And so learning to look out for it and to attend to it, you know, EAPs aren't going to solve it right now. Like the types of things that were kind of doing a poor job, but available before, they just aren't engineered for times like this. And so we're going to need to start figuring out how to support people very, very quickly.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you so much. And thanks for opening yourself up to Twitter for us. I really pulled out of this a lot. You know, this is our new normal as we go forward. And I feel really proud of our community because, you know, you said that trust moves us quickly to action. Mm-hmm. And I have seen more action in this community and collaboration over the last few weeks than I could even have imagined be possible. So that is just something you've really, and that gratitude and the gratitude for all that around us. I think right now, looking at our new normal, we're setting the bar higher to what we expect as community members, what we expect as employees or employers, and really trying to build that resilience. And resilience through happiness, to me, sounds like a great way to do it.
Yeah.
So
everybody underestimates how resilient we are. but right now we're going to see it in action. And so it's not that it hasn't been there before, but we're going to see examples of it that will make us way stronger in the future. But we just have to trust that we are resilient and pay attention to it when it happens, so that we've got it as a resource that our brain is aware of in the future when we go through these difficult times again.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And I appreciate your time and volunteering to do this and spend some time with the not-for-profits in our community. Thank you.
Our mission is to support people on their mission. And so we have fallen in love with what we call the mission-driven organization. Because it's great to help somebody sell more widgets or more drugs, but it's way better to support the organizations that are trying to keep people alive and fed and keep them learning. And so it's my pleasure. And if there's any other way I can support you going forward, absolutely, please feel free to reach out and ask. All right?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim. Have a great day, a great weekend.
Thank you all.
So I just want to take a minute to announce some upcoming sessions. As I noted before, we are going to run these twice a week, and we're always asking for your feedback. What would you like to see? So on April 6th, on Monday, I'll be running a session on asset-based collaboration, and there's a little bit of homework to do previous to that, or prior to that session rather, and it's just looking at your assets. So in this session, we will all have breakout rooms, so you'll get to work with some of your colleagues in the community. And we're really pushing for that, you know, to bring to reality those comments that came forward about people wanting to connect together. And let's do that. And based on this one and the questions that came in, I think there will be a part 2. We're also joining forces with our good friends at Capacity Canada. I see Moira Taylor's on the line. Hi, Moira. And Fred Galloway is going to come. And we're asking you to, you know, EDs or CEOs to come with 3 other board members, so we can facilitate 4 from every organization. And we've had a donor step forward and buy us a bigger Zoom license, so we can facilitate up to 500 people now in these sessions. So we want, I know my hands were I was weeping. The more people we can open this up to, the better. And we also have, you know, we're all wondering how we're going to weather this storm financially, and what does this mean for us with all this funding being announced, and do we qualify? So we have 2 individuals from KPMG coming in on Monday, April 13th, and they will be running a session where we will find out the ins and outs of what all of this means for our organizations, what we qualify for, what subsidies, what loans are available at no interest, wherever we may be in that spectrum. So again, we ask you please to share these sessions. They're free. Share them far and wide in Waterloo region. We just want to make sure that we're offering programming that's going to help us get through this together. And with cameras on, we're able to build those relationships a little bit faster maybe, but I see so many friends in the room. It's just a great opportunity. So, and the other thing you'll see on your evaluation, which we so need you to fill in, we want to start a Slack channel for not-for-profits. So any new information you receive, any links, any questions, we can turn it out to the community. So we'll really be able to let everybody populate with things that are really relevant to them. And, you know, we're not alone in this. No one asked for this, as Bethan said at the beginning, but we're not alone going through it. It's not just happening to one person. So the more support we can give each other through this, the stronger we're going to be on the other side. Any questions, please reach out to Jim. Jim, thank you again so much. And I want everyone to have a great weekend. Take care. Thank you.